Hello! 10 years ago, I read a book with a blind main character, and then I learned Braille.
So we call it Braille, but it was invented by a French guy in 1824, so I guess technically it would be pronounced Braille. I will not be pronouncing it that way. Anyway, Louis Braille, born in 1809, ended up blind after an accident when he was 3 years old. But he was also like the smartest kid in town, so a local nobleman paid for him to attend the Royal Institute for Blind Youth. In 1821, the school received a visit from Charles Barbier de la Serre, who was an army captain. He stopped by because he realized that a method that he had helped develop for written communication for soldiers to communicate with each other at night may be useful for the kids there. His system was imaginatively called night writing, or écriture nocturne. But it was a little cumbersome because it was just meant for short messages. The symbols were based on sounds rather than letters. Each character used quite a few dots, and you had to trace the shapes with your finger. Like, you couldn't read the entire character with just a fingertip. So Louis started working on his own version of it, and by the time he was 20, he was satisfied enough and published a booklet on it. The other kids at his school really loved Braille because they could read for the first time, and they could start taking notes in class and study them later rather than just trying to memorize everything. They started hand transcribing books for themselves and having a lot of fun with the writing system, but unfortunately the people in charge weren't exactly thrilled. You see, the school was less of a school and more of a showpiece, sort of a, look how nicely we treat our blind kids here in France. It was also for profit, which never ends well, and in fact gets a lot worse, because the way that they made their money was by selling crafts that the blind kids had made. So they thought if the kids learned how to read and write, they would become more independent and the school might earn less money. Oh no. So the administrators confiscated all of their tools for writing Braille and burned all of the books that they had hand transcribed for themselves. The students were not too happy with this and stole forks from the dining room so that they could write in Braille again. Eventually, though, there were enough thoughts and prayers that something actually changed. The Royal Institute for Blind Youths adopted Braille, and it became official in all of France 2 years after Louis died in 1852 at the age of 43. The system quickly spread to other places, including England and the United States. In 1932, it became the official and exclusive method of teaching blind people to read and write in America. Today, most languages have their own form of Braille that has been adapted to meet the needs of different scripts. In addition, many places have laws that require Braille in certain places. For instance, in the United States, it is required to have Braille on building signage, and in the UK, it is required to have it on medicine labels. A lot of different currencies also have some kind of tactile way to identify the bills, though it may not be official Braille. In the US, the paper that we use for cash isn't sturdy enough to keep Braille long term. The dots will rub away. But the National Federation of the Blind has said that it's not a big deal and we don't need to advocate for any federal changes to that. In case you missed the number at the start of this section, Braille was invented in 1824. So happy 200 years to Braille! Alright, that's the end of the history section, and it's going to be a pain to edit. Time to talk about my favorite part, Braille as a language. Let me get settled in here. Braille characters are composed of different patterns of up to 6 dots in one 2x3 Braille cell. They are counted left top to bottom, then right top to bottom. So if I were to say dot 5, that would be the center right dot. Standard Braille paper allows for 40 or 43 characters per line and 25 lines per page. The alphabet is super cool. The letters are split into groups and they follow a predictable pattern. You have the first 10 letters, which use just the top 4 dots, so dots 1, 2, 4, and 5. Then the next 10 letters after that repeat the first 10 letters, but with dot 3 added. Then U, V, X, Y, and Z take the second set, the first 5 characters of the second set of numbers, and add dot 6. W breaks this pattern because when Louis invented Braille, the W wasn't in French yet, so it's just a backwards R for whatever reason. There are also dot combinations for punctuation and even special characters like the @ symbol or a $sign. And there are characters to indicate or terminate special aspects of the language, like capitalization or italics. Indicators are pretty self-explanatory. They just say, hey, the next character is this. So what's a terminator? Well, if you use 2 capitalization indicators in a row, it says the next entire word is capital. So if you use 3 capitalization indicators in a row, it says the next whole passage is capitalized. So you need the terminator to say, hey, the capitalization ends here, and we are returning to normal text in the following sentences. You may think that numbers would have their own symbols, right? Because they're super special. They're used frequently, and while they have their own characters in the Roman alphabet, or well, I guess that they're Arabic. But you'd be wrong, because no, there's a numerical indicator, and the first 10 letters of the alphabet create the numbers, and numbers are terminated by punctuation or a space as a rule, so there's no use for a numerical terminator. But the fun doesn't end there. If you ever looked closely at a bathroom sign, you'll see the Braille words for men and women there. But if you look even closer, you'll think, hey, that's not the right number of characters for either of those words. Well, let me introduce you to Grade 2 Braille. It is so cool. It's like a secret code. So most letters by themselves can stand for an entire word. Like the letter K means knowledge. You can write the entire 9-letter word for knowledge with one single Braille cell. There are other symbols which stand in for other common combinations of letters, like CH, TH, ER, and EN. That's the one that makes bathroom signs shorter. But it gets even cooler. Some Braille characters can mean multiple things depending on where they are in the word. So take this symbol, for instance. By itself, it means be, like to be, the word. If it's followed by other characters, it still means be, but like as a prefix, like in something like be still, my beating heart. Be still would use that contraction at the beginning of the word. But if that same symbol has letters on both sides, it's BB. You can spell a word like bubbling, and ing has its own contraction as well, so it's even shorter. If there's more than one way to contract a word, you default to the one that either contracts more characters or uses fewer Braille cells. There are other rules as well, like you don't contract characters that meet in the middle of a compound word. So like TH is a common contraction, but you wouldn't use it in the word pothole. Common words have their own contractions as well. It's a lot like texting almost. Like you can contract the word Braille into just BRL or the word tomorrow as just TM. It's so cool and efficient to the point where some anecdotal research has Braille readers clocking in at 200 words per minute. We could all be speed reading in the dark if Braille was just everywhere. Anyway, so everything is automatically in grade 2 Braille. So if you need like the letter C by itself but not the word can, you have to use a grade 1 indicator. An even more contracted grade 3 Braille does exist, but it's not standardized. It's more like a personal shorthand used by individuals and not in publications. There's also special Braille for music and for scientific or mathematical purposes. So like the possibilities are really endless when it comes to Braille. And it's so cool. So now that you know a bit about how Braille itself works, how do you get that on the paper? Well, let's talk about the tools. The most basic and... Okay, the word is not acoustic, but it feels like the word acoustic. Well, if you want to do it by hand, you use a Braille slate and stylus, also known as a Braille frame and stylus. Basically, you just put a Braille cell template over some paper, which guides a stylus, which looks like an awl, so that you can put the indentations where they belong and all in a straight line. Interestingly, you actually have to make the characters backwards so that when you turn the paper over, it can be read correctly. Wow! Now you may be wondering, can Braille be double-sided? And the answer is yes. All you have to do is offset the spacing so that you can emboss both sides. And most Braille frames are designed to do this. If you just flip it over, it will be interline. Also, you can make corrections by basically pressing out the indentations and doing it again. The next step up, I guess, is a brailler, which is a lot like a typewriter. It has 6 keys, a space, a backspace, etc. All you gotta do is load your Braille paper and start typing. The most popular version is the Perkins Brailler, and they have a smart version as well, which has a video display, which shows sim braille as well as large font text. And the smart version also makes it a lot easier to edit and save and transfer files. A newer tool is the refreshable Braille display, which is hella expensive, but you can connect it to a computer and it will automatically translate text into up to 80 characters of Braille, which automatically refreshes as you move your mouse or input commands. There are some other tools, but those are the big ones. But you actually don't need anything special or fancy to type in Braille. Most standard keyboards will allow Braille input. You may have noticed that your F and J keys have a little bump on them. Those are not for blind or low vision people. They're for anyone who wants to touch type. But when using Braille software or typing into any text box that accepts Braille, the F is dot 1 and the J is dot 4. To get characters with more than one dot, you just press multiple keys at once. You can test your keyboard by pressing any 6 letter keys at once, and if you see all 6 letters that you typed, then your keyboard can do Braille. Even with all of this technology, Braille resources are super hard to make. They require special printers and heavier weight paper, not to mention the transcription is time-consuming, and because it's not one-to-one, they essentially have to be translated. So with widespread unavailability of Braille, even with new technology like refreshable Braille displays, where is Braille headed? So remember when I said I learned Braille way at the start of this video? Well, I started on this Australian website. It was probably just the first Google result, but then I found the National Federation of the Blind, and they have a lot more resources. Now, I do almost everything on a whim, and deciding to learn Braille was no exception. I thought, wouldn't I be like a really cool person if I knew Braille? Because not a lot of sighted people know Braille, so then I could brag about it. So I started as just a way to be not like other kids, but then when I actually really started learning it, I thought, wait a minute, this is actually really beautiful. And maybe it's my love of systems and rules, but the efficiency really got to me, like it struck me in the heart. But then I learned that not a lot of low vision people ever learn Braille. A report from the NFB from 2009 says that 90% of low vision children never learn to read or write at all because they're not given access to Braille. Why? Well, it's freaking ableism again, like it almost always is. Most children who are blind have some remaining vision, and unfortunately, the people in charge tend to really focus in on that remaining vision and force them to learn to read print with magnification, even if it's not easy for them, and even if they won't find magnification in real life, which is hella lame, and I don't need to expand on that. Another reason could be leaps in accessibility technology like audiobooks and screen readers, which are good and helpful, but 2 things about that. One, the NFB calls this the paradox of technology. It can be really easy to think that, well, with audiobooks, everyone is equal, right? But most teachers say that technology like that should supplement rather than replace Braille. The NFB puts it this way: no one would seriously suggest that alternate sources of information like television and radio replace the need for a sighted child to learn to read. The same should be true for Braille. And 2, there are parts of written language that aren't accessible through audio, like the way punctuation and spacing can change the way you read something. Like I noticed a comma in the middle of a phrase. It changed the meaning. Did you intend this one stroke and you consumed my waking days? We all deserve to have one stroke consume our waking days. So I couldn't help but be sad when I found out that something that is essentially its own language, even if it's just a written one, is dying out more and more every day. The report I mentioned earlier has 2 more relevant figures for us. The first is as many as 75,000 people lose their vision every year. Second, the effects of being unable to read and write are that 70% of blind adults are unemployed, and as many as 50% of blind high school kids drop out, which is why the NFB holds firm that literacy in Braille is a right for blind people. It empowers them and it grants them way more independence. So, doubling down now on the real future of Braille. The source that I used for the majority of this section of the video was from 2009, which was kind of a long time ago, so, things have changed since then. The document had a list of goals at the end, and I'm helping in my little way right now with the last goal, which was to inform more people that literacy in Braille is a right for blind people. But I have like one subscriber. What up, Jasmine? And so I'm not sure how much I'll help. But the other goals are a bit more interesting. The other goals from 2009 were to double the number of children who can read Braille by 2015, to pass legislation requiring special needs teachers to know Braille by 2015, making more resources available, and making Braille courses available to all students, sighted or low vision, so that Braille becomes a recognized form of literacy. The most recent numbers that I can find are from the American Printing House for the Blind annual poll from 2017. Now, these aren't true statistics because the poll is for the purpose of figuring out the funding for legally blind students and, whether they get more resources in Braille, audiobooks, or large print. But out of 63,357 student respondents, only 7.8% were Braille readers. That number isn't exactly encouraging, but I know that the NFB has been working hard. In the 2022 presidential speech, they mention making the NFB Braille Enrichment for Literacy and Learning Academies program available both in person and at home for pandemic reasons, which is cool. The speech also mentions more teachers joining their teaching programs, more coursework for licensure in teaching blind students, though I'm not sure if that specifically has anything to do with Braille or not. However, the institution is clear that they would like to train and certify more Braille transcriptionists and proofreaders.
So if you liked what you heard about Braille today, if you also think it's beautiful and cool, then I've got good news for you, especially if you plan to get old one day, since you're probably going to lose your vision. Well, everything you need to learn Braille is completely free. The typing software is called Perky Duck by Duxbury. It's open, it's a free download, and you can get certified through the National Federation of the Blind, who are in contract with the Library of Congress. You read the lessons and translate the exercises. There are reading exercises as well, and they pair you with a professional who grades your work. If you finish all 20 lessons, you complete a simple final, which is 35 Braille pages from any manuscript you choose. You send it off to the Library of Congress, and you're good to go. You're a certified Braille transcriptionist. In all, it takes between 9 months and a year. I tried twice, and I think both times I didn't make it past probably lesson 8. Kind of a funny story about that. The reason is I kept messing up, and even though my instructors were really nice to me, they were like, just fix these 5 errors and move on, you're good to go. I was a gifted kid, and anything that I got wrong felt like an insurmountable failure and also the end of the world. I was also obsessed with being like the fastest person to learn things, so getting anything back and having to redo it was not fun for me. But the last time I tried was 7 years ago, and I'd like to think I've grown since then. I don't think I've completely recovered from gifted kid syndrome, but I might try again. I don't think I have the confidence to do any actual transcription work on a volunteer basis. Like, I worked as a copy editor for 2 months. I did 3 assignments, and all 3 times I nearly burst into tears because I was so worried that I would mess up or get something wrong. And I quit that job. But I can get the certification, maybe, even if it's just to boost their numbers, but I don't know if that would help. So yeah, Braille is super cool, and you should learn it and then start reading in the dark. We could all be reading in the dark, 200 words per minute. It's so epic. And I think that's the end of the video.
I took French in high school. 5 years of it.